and he's going to talk about allergy testing today. Neeraj, can you go ahead?
Yes, sir. We will start. So I am highly thankful to National Board of Examination for starting this webinar series and with an important topic with approach to allergic disorders. This topic is important because of two reasons. The first reason is that allergies are rising day by day and they are a very common, most common disorder nowadays. And the second thing, in our normal curriculum of postgraduate teaching, the allergies are, we can say, like the portion is very less. So we need to understand them a little better. So that's why this topic is important. So we have chosen this topic as we understand that over past almost 70, 80 years or 100 years, the allergies and anaphylaxis incidence is increasing. And that is why knowing about allergies is important. So I will be speaking about pathophysiology of allergy spectrum, how we should identify the allergen, immunotherapy, the current recommendations of immunotherapy, and then I will be summarizing my talk. So the bitter truth is that allergies are not just limited to sneezing, itching, or wheezing. They are much beyond that. They are a systemic disease. They affect children with high morbidity. They causes interference with the quality of simultaneously, the caregivers also become much anxious when their children are not doing well, and that lead to reduced work performance of caregivers also. And that is why it becomes a very expensive disease in terms of mortality and morbidity overall. So as we mentioned, that allergy is not itching, wheezing, and sneezing. It is much beyond that. So it is a long-term immune dysfunction and inflammation which affect virtually every system of the body. That is the respiratory system, including asthma, rhinitis, conjunctivitis, to skin, that is dermatitis, urticaria. Then the food allergy is there, anaphylaxis is there, drug allergies are there, and then there are certain occupational allergies and many other different type of disorders which are there. So depending upon the route of exposure of allergen, the allergic manifestations will be there. Suppose if the allergen is entering through the inhaled route, that could be the pollen, that could be the fungal spore, some animal danders, dust mite, then at that time more common symptoms could be rhinitis or conjunctivitis or asthma. If the ingestion is more through the food intake, then at that time the primary symptoms are related to GI manifestations, but the systems can cross over also. So a milk allergic child can also present with asthma. A milk allergic child can also present with skin manifestations like atopic dermatitis. Similarly, if it is through the injectable route, then it can cause systemic anaphylaxis, or if it is through the contact, then at the time it can cause contact dermatitis. So we see here that different type of allergic manifestations as per the different systems are there. And as per the life, especially in infancy, the skin allergy or the atopic dermatitis is most common, followed by the manifestations of food allergy comes, and then asthma, and allergic rhinitis starts later in onset, and it is more prevalent in the adolescents and adults. And that is why in children, we used to see most commonly skin allergies in the form of eczema or atopic dermatitis, followed by asthma, and rhinitis very less cases. On the contrary, in adults, rhinitis predominates, followed by asthma, and very less cases of skin allergy. If we see over last 25, 30 years, then the asthma prevalence has increased hugely. From 4% to start with, it has reached up till almost 17%. That means it has quadrupled. Similarly, if we see the trend of allergic rhinitis over the same period, it has also quadrupled, that from 6% to 21 or 22%. The recent paper from 2018 also suggests that allergic manifestations are in the form of atopic asthma. They are much more common in the eastern part of India, and then they are also there in the northern part also. And you see, actually, it is entire India. Similarly, skin allergies like atopic dermatitis. Infantile atopic dermatitis usually starts somewhere around 4 months of age, whereas childhood atopic dermatitis usually starts at 4 years of age. So that is why we need to really speak about allergy, because it is usually affecting a lot of chunk of our population. So why this allergy is very important to the pediatricians? This term allergy was coined by a Viennese pediatrician in 1906. His name was Clemens von Burkitt, and he labeled this allergy term, coined this allergy term, labeling as specifically altered reactivity of the organism. That means whenever an organism or a human being is subjected to certain external agent and he is reacting differently, he is not reacting as expected, he is reacting differently, he labeled it as allergy. Later on, the hypersensitivity types came up. The type 1, 2, 3, 4. You all are aware about type 1 is more dealing with the IgE mediated phenomena. Type 2 is basically IgM, IgG mediated antibodies. Type 3 is immune complex mediated, and type 4 is cell mediated. Here, for today's talk, we will be speaking more about type 1 hypersensitivity, which is more or less considered to be clinical allergy. I'd like to define these three terms: hypersensitivity, allergy, and atopy. Often these three terms are used interchangeably, but actually there is some difference in these terms. So hypersensitivity is basically an immunological phenomena. Allergy is hypersensitivity with clinical manifestations. So it is possible that some person could be sensitive to certain uh, product or certain substance, but could not be allergic. That means he's sensitive. If you test them in the laboratory, the test is coming out to be positive, but he's not clinically reacting abnormally to it. So he is not clinically allergic. If the clinical manifestations are accompanied along with the positive test or the hypersensitivity, then it becomes allergy. And atopy is simple, the genetic or the familial tendency that there is some family history of allergic disorder which is there. So question is that why allergy develops in some and not all? So there is a famous hygiene hypothesis. I am sure you must have heard about this hygiene hypothesis. What it says that whenever the infective diseases like rheumatic fever, hepatitis A, tuberculosis, and other infective diseases reduces, the immune mediated diseases increases, and allergy or asthma are one of them. So this is basically more hygiene, more allergic disorders, more immune disorders. So this was the hygiene hypothesis. This has been recently changed. So why this change happened? I will take back to the history, that is Paleolithic era. In the Paleolithic era, the human beings were living in small groups. Means like we were all living like hunters, gatherers, and at that time, we were all having some commensal organisms with us, like some helminths, hepatitis A, gut microbiota, and H. pylori. All these microorganisms were living with us. And at that time, there was no allergy. Everybody was living in a friendly manner. Then the first epidemiological transition happened, and what happened that animal husbandry is developed. We domesticated cats and dogs, and then certain new intruders came in. That means coronaviruses, paramyxoviruses, orthomyxoviruses, measles, mumps. They all came in, and at that time the older microbiota still remained with us, but the newer intruders came in. At that time also there was no allergy. But the problem started here in the second epidemiological transition. In the second epidemiological transition, we moved to cities, trams, we started using soaps, detergents, washed foods. So that led to less orophycal transmission, less animal contact. We started using antibiotics. We used to do deworming frequently. And the older microbiota, which used to live with us earlier on, started reducing. That means now we started having less helminths, less toxoplasma, less H. pylori, less hepatitis A because of more vaccination and all those things. But the newer intruders still remain. So it is the disbalance between the two types of microbiota, the older one and the newer one, that led to the immune mediated disorders or the allergy. And that is why the hygiene hypothesis has now recently been changed to targeted hygiene, in which it is not the absolute hygiene we are talking about. It is basically certain microbiota and other microbiota. It is the disbalance between the two microbiota that led to the allergic disorders or immune mediated disorder. So that is called as targeted hygiene. Now the question is how allergy develops. So whenever an external foreign substance comes in contact with the body, that is called as antigen or the allergen, and then antigen presenting cell presents it to the T helper cell. Now this T helper cell has two routes to go, whether this T helper cell can go in the Th1 pathway or the Th2 pathway. The Th1 pathway is basically the pathway of the infections or tolerance, whereas the Th2 pathway is the atopic pathway or the allergenic pathway. So decide that which person will take the Th1 pathway or the Th2 pathway. So the question is, at what time we became allergic? When we were children, when in the adolescence or in the elderly, or in the pregnancy, in utero. So at what time we became allergic? So we need to understand a certain individual is born with a genetic predisposition that we define as atopy. So a certain person is born with a genetic predisposition. When he comes out in the environment, then in the environment there are many different types of allergens he get exposed to. So it will depend upon the type of allergen, allergenicity of allergen, dose of allergen, and the time of exposure of the allergen. So all these factors, along with the genetic predisposition, will decide that whether this particular person will go towards the Th1 pathway, that is the tolerance of the infective pathway, or whether this particular person to the Th2 pathway or the allergic pathway. So there is a complex phenomena, and this all will decide. So what are the genetic factors? Like there are certain genes which have been responsible. Here you can see that this red one is strongly associated with asthma, atopy, and high Ig levels. So this gene like RAD50 and IL-13, so this particular gene. Similarly, this particular gene is responsible for allergic rhinitis, atopy. So asthma is like a weak or the moderate correlation is there. So we need to understand that there is a genetics and then the certain environmental factors with a complex interplay between the two will decide. As we spoken earlier, if we are having a normal intestinal microbiota, we will having a healthy gut microbiota, and that will lead to immune tolerance, or that will be helped by exclusive breastfeeding. If we are promoting to the vaginal birth mode rather than the cesarean deliveries, infections are there in the first year of life, or if a small child who is having, you can say like elder sibling is going out to play and coming back with certain infections, transmitting it to the small child, and then that small child is getting, you can say like active Th1 arm, so he will be less allergic. But if we are, you can say like reducing the breast milk, we are going with the cesarean sections, infections are less. If lesser siblings are there, no sibling are there, if there are no pets at home, then at that time the microbiota becomes dysbiotic, and at that time that will promote towards the atopic diseases. That we need to understand. And that is the concept of the prebiotic and probiotic use. So certain microbiota, that's in the red column, the microbiota like Haemophilus, Neisseria, Moraxella, they are, you can say like pro-allergenic, whereas these microbiota like Lactobacillus, Bifidobacterium, these are protective from allergies. Then certain other environmental factors like pollution and allergies. Here we see on the left hand, it is a bright colored India. And here you see just a normal India. So this is the normal night and this is Diwali night. So what we are paying for this bright colored India is a high air quality index. So much pollution. Can you see the last 5-year AQI on the consecutive Diwali nights? So the last year in 2019, it was 350. We were having a very poor air quality. And this was the AQI 350. We are saying very poor. Now just imagine that 70% of the Indian population is living in the rural area and they are exposed to this biomass fuel. And just see that this little chap who is getting exposed with the dung, animal dung, this twigs, crop residues, wood, charcoal, kerosene burning. And here just see the PM 2.5 is 1125. PM10 is 1142. So earlier we were saying that 350 AQI is very poor. Here you see that the AQI which is more than 1000, which is never measured because it is indoor pollution. So indoor pollution is much more contributory, much more harmful as compared to outdoor pollution, which is there. Then BDs. People think that BD is like a local type of thing and it is less harmful as compared to cigarette. So it is wrong. BDs are even having 7 times more nicotine content than cigarettes, and they are having more than 2 times tar content as compared to cigarettes. Mosquito coil. So mosquito coil, one particular mosquito coil burning will produce 70 to 137 cigarettes equivalent PM 2.5 content. You can just imagine that poor child or a person who is sleeping in the night and with a mosquito coil burning, then at that time, by the morning, he has already inhaled PM 2.5 content almost equivalent to 100 cigarettes, which is important. So all these environmental pollutants, what they will do? They will not directly act as allergens, but they will increase the allergenicity of an allergen. They will increase the potency of an allergen, and ultimately, when this allergen get attached to the antigen presenting cell or the allergen presenting cell, and then this Th2 arm is getting stimulated, and ultimately it will lead to immune and the allergic response. So we need to understand all this sort of pollution, whether it is outdoor or indoor, this is going to increase or further aggravate the allergenic potential. So I am going to sum up whatever we have just described. A person is born with a certain genetic potential, and then depending upon the allergens, pollution, smoking, physical damage, certain microbiota, all these environmental changes that will lead to changes in the genetic structures, proteins, and then cells and tissue in the susceptible individual, and ultimately the person will come out as a Th2 high cytokine individual with high interleukin levels, and that will lead to the allergenic phenomenon. So this was about the pathophysiology. Now coming to ways to detect allergy. I will request all the students, if there is any question, you can type in the chat box simultaneously, or we can take the questions in the last also. I am comfortable both ways, whatever you like. So ways to detect allergy. First of all, it is important that clinical history. We have to take a detailed history. In 90% of the cases, it is a history which is important, and then the examination will help us in only 10% or less than that of the cases. So what type of questions we need to ask in the clinical history? First of all, the person is having local manifestations or systemic manifestations. For an example, if a person comes to you and says that, doctor, I am having a localized rash, but there is no other area which is involved, there is no other systemic manifestation which is there, then it is probably some sort of local allergen application, or could be cell mediated or type 4 hypersensitivity is responsible. That could be like some metal allergies, or you can say like latex allergy, gloves allergy, or some certain like slippers and all those things. So they all can cause nickel allergies. They can cause the local allergy manifestations. On the other hand, systemic manifestations. For example, if a patient comes and says that he is having some GI manifestations in the form of loose stools, vomiting, abdominal cramps, or he is having respiratory issues, rhinitis, or asthma, or these type of problems, or he is having dermatitis type of problems, then at that time the systemic manifestations are there. So we need to really see that which particular type of allergen is responsible for the systemic manifestations, which is going inside the body through various routes. That could be the inhaled, that could be the oral. The second is the outdoor versus indoor. So we need to ask that whether your complaints are more in the outdoor environment or when you are inside. Outdoor environmental allergens are more common like pollens, fungus, they are more common, whereas indoor allergens are more common like once again fungal spores and dust mite. Even cockroaches are also there in the indoor environment. Then perennial and seasonal. So if the person is having perennial allergic problem or asthmatic problem, then at that time the allergens could be those which are having round the year problem, causing like for an example cockroach, fungus, house dust mite. On the other hand, if the person is having some seasonal exhibitions, then at that time it is likely that certain pollens are responsible, because the pollen concentration is high in one particular season and that is responsible for the manifestations. Then the diurnal variation. If a person is having more symptoms in the late night hours or early morning hours because of the diurnal variation of histamine release, then at that time it is more likely towards allergenic phenomena. If the person is having, like, what are the exacerbating factors? We need to really ask that when the person is exposed to dust or certain particular, like certain old books or certain particular area, then at that time the symptoms get exacerbated, or the symptoms get relieved when the person is doing certain yoga or he is taking some bronchodilators or inhalers. So that also becomes important. Then sometimes occupational history is important. For an example, a person who is working in a cotton factory or working in a silk factory, then at that time that particular allergen inhalation might be responsible for his asthmatic condition. Pet exposure, which is important. If a person who has recently bought a dog or a cat at home for a few months and the child symptoms are also for a few months, then at that time we have to really see that whether that particular pet is responsible for allergy or not. Exposure to smoke. Now that smoke could be the active smoke or the passive smoke. They both are responsible. So if somebody, you have to ask that whether somebody is smoking in the family or not. If somebody is smoking in the family, but they used to say, oh, they do not smoke in front of the child, the father smokes outside and then comes. But no, this is also not allowed. Reason behind, whenever a person is smoking even outside, the smoke particles, they are getting attached to the clothes. And whenever the person comes inside the home, the child will get attracted towards father or whosoever grandfather, and at that time he will get exposed to that smoke. Or it could be the burning fuel, which is also important. Even it could be the agarbattis, dhoop battis, mosquito coils, they all are responsible. So we need to really take a good history. Family history, sometimes the generations might skip. So sometimes the mother could be having a certain different type of allergy or father could be having, but sometimes the generation might slip. It could be the maternal parents or the maternal grandparents or the paternal grandparents, which could also be importantly in the history. And effect on quality of life, which is very important. Like, because of all these allergic manifestations, how badly the child is affected. He has to miss the schools, he has to miss his play, tuitions, parents, like whether the parent or the child, are they getting some sleepless nights? So all these parameters are very important in delineating how badly the child is affected and which particular allergen the child is having problems. Then the other thing is relevant physical examination. Like for an example, in case of allergic rhinitis, there are certain manifestations like allergic shiners, and adenoid hypertrophy, open mouth, and in case of asthma, wheeze, and these would be there. In supporting labs, so a particular person can come to you with certain blood reports in which certain IgE levels are high or eosinophil content is high, then that might be suggestive of allergic phenomena, not necessarily, we will come to that. Then the another thing is allergen avoidance. Sometimes patient come to you or the parent come to you says, the doctor, I feel my child is allergic to this particular food. I have avoided this particular food and my child became better. So this is allergen avoidance. They have already given you the history, so that is an important clue. Or a challenge test in which they will say that when I give this thing, my child used to cough. When my child get exposed to this thing, then at that time my child is having this type of problem. So sometimes in the history they will tell you about the you can say like the exposure history, or later on you can ask them to avoid certain things, or you can do a challenge test. So depending upon that, you can detect the allergies. So coming to the diagnostic tests, there are various type of diagnostic tests which are available. Like it could be the blood eosinophil levels, it could be IgE mediated test, or certain lung functions like spirometry, impulse oscillometry, or this inflammometry, measuring the inflammation. I will be focusing my talk today on IgE based test. That is the total IgE, specific IgE, and skin test. Whom to test? Should we subject everyone to test who is coming to us with their one episode of sneeze or one episode of wheeze? No. So we need to test the patients who are having persistent problems, recurrent or persistent problems. Then at that time we need to test. Or the patient who is having some uncontrolled allergy, then at that time we need to test. But otherwise, the first episode or occasional episode, one or two episodes per year, they need not to be tested. Which allergen should be tested for? That we need to understand that depending upon the history, whatsoever history you have delineated, we need to test those particular allergens, not a whole battery. You might have seen that a patient comes to you and says, the doctor, I have got this allergy panel test done in which 50, 100, 150 tests have been done. So there is no need to do that. This is wrong. It should not be done. It has to be minimum number of allergens which you should be able to detect from the history that you need to test. So in case of respiratory allergies like rhinitis and asthma, the most common allergen in India is house dust mite. House dust mite is a small mite. It usually resides inside the mattresses. It's inside the foam mattresses. It is there in the carpets, in the curtains, and so it is there in the dust. So the size of the house dust mite is 1 by 60. That is 1 by 60. 1 by 60 of the human hair diameter. So it is as small. You cannot see it by the naked eye. What happens when you are sleeping? Then at that time, this house dust mite requires humidity and warmth. It comes out, crosses the bed sheet, but you cannot see it. It crosses the bed sheet, and then thereafter, it feeds on the epithelial cells and the hairs which are there on the bed sheet. And then it produces certain excreta. That excreta is highly allergenic. Now, this excreta get rubbed on the body, causing atopic dermatitis or urticarial features. In the morning, the excreta or the house dust mite content is maximum on the bed sheet, and then in the morning either mother or maid will shake the bed sheet, and ultimately all this excreta or the allergenic material will be mixed in the room environment, and we are inhaling that, or our child is inhaling that. So when the patient is inhaling that, then at that time his symptoms get aggravated, and that is the reason that in early morning hours usually the rhinitis or the asthma symptoms are much more. The other common feature, the other common responsible agents for rhinitis and asthma are cockroach, which is a perennial allergen, then pet danders, mold spores, certain pollens from the grasses or the weeds of the trees, and then occupational allergens, which we mentioned. It could be suspected food item like milk, egg, and peanuts. These three are the most common allergens in less than 5 years of age for food items, and then certain insects. Now, I will be revisiting the type 1 hypersystem reaction or the allergic reaction. We understand that when allergen comes in contact with the B cells, they stimulate the plasma cells to release IgE antibodies. These IgE antibodies get attached to the mast cell, and then they wait. They wait for the re-exposure to happen. Whenever the re-exposure of allergen happens, then at that time this particular allergen will combine to the bound IgE, which is already bound to the mast cell. When it combines to that, it stimulates the mast cell, and the mast cell bursts. It gets degranulated. So the granules which are containing histamine and other chemicals, they are released, producing chemical reaction. So here there are two steps of testing. One step is the free IgE molecule, and the second step is this histamine release, so which is based upon the bound IgE. So the free IgE molecule is the basis of the blood test. If you are testing total IgE, if you are testing specific IgE, then you are actually testing the free IgE. Whereas if you are testing the skin prick test or you are testing the challenge test, then you are really re-exposing the person with the same allergen and waiting for the histamine to get released. So you are actually checking the bound IgE, which is histamine and the chemicals, depending upon skin and the challenge test. So as we mentioned, that in vitro test are total IgE or specific IgE, which detects the free IgE, and in vivo or the skin prick or the challenge test, which detect the bound IgE. So as we understand that free IgE testing, that if you are testing at this level, so this is much inferior as compared if you are really reciprocating the same allergic reaction under controlled circumstances. This is more better, more superior. That is why it's called that the skin prick test or the challenge test are far superior as compared to the total IgE or the specific IgE. What is skin prick test? So in skin prick test, as the name mentioned, we are pricking the skin. Now the name prick seems to be like probably it could be having some pain or some blood. No, it is a bloodless, painless technique. How it is done? See. So this is the skin layer, this is epidermis, this is dermis. So all the blood vessels and the pain fibers are lying in the dermis, whereas this is epidermis. What we are doing is we are just taking a minimal quantity of allergen, and then with the help of a specific lancet, we are delivering this allergen here in the epidermal layer, which is not having any blood vessel, which is not having any pain fiber. So ultimately, this process is bloodless, painless technique. We remove the lancet, and then thereafter the allergen goes down, diffuses down, get attached to the bound IgE on the mast cell, releases the histamine and other chemical mediators, and a wheal and flare reaction, that is bumping on the skin, will appear within 15 minutes. So this is called a skin prick test. It is very good, having a good sensitivity of 90%. Positive and negative predictive values are also good in high 90s. But we cannot do skin prick if the skin is not healthy. If the person is having diffuse atopic dermatitis, then at that time you cannot do it, as it is depending upon the histamine release. So if a patient who has got recent episode of anaphylaxis in which histamine is already been released, then at that time you cannot do it. You have to wait for 3 to 4 weeks so that the histamine content can restore, and then thereafter you can once again do the test. Or if the person is on antihistaminics, then you need to stop antihistaminics for a few days and then only you can do it, right? But if the patient is on short-term steroids like 3 days, 5 days, 10 days, then there is no contraindication, you can safely do it. Or if a patient is on topical tacrolimus, this is given specially for dermatitis, atopic dermatitis, then at that time you can do it. Now coming to IgE, so till now we all were having an understanding that the IgE is the test for allergy, but from now today onward we will not consider it. Why? Total IgE in Indian children, it is normally raised. So whatever values you see, like 35 is a cutoff, that is a Western literature. From Indian literature, it is up till 250 to 300 kilo units per liter. They all are normal. So the Indian IgE values are much higher. There is no reference value for that. So it rises in allergic diseases, but it can also rise in parasitic diseases, Epstein-Barr virus, rheumatological conditions, smoking, HIV, pollution, and many other different type of reasons by virtue of which IgE increases. So it has got many false positives and false negatives. So in our routine allergy practice, routine allergy diagnosis, total IgE is not having any rule. What I want to say, if a person who is having normal IgE value, total IgE value, that could also be having allergy. On the other hand, if a person who is having a high IgE could be non-allergic. So total IgE is not having any value for diagnosis or ruling out allergy. Specific IgE means if you are detecting the IgE against a specific allergen, like for an example, milk specific IgE, egg specific IgE, dust specific IgE. So that becomes specific IgE. So this is having a good negative predictive value, but the positive predictive value is not great. What we want to say is that many a times in the outpatient department, a patient comes to you with a report in which 50 or 100 food items have been done, and out of which patient is having positive values for most of them. So what you can say is that the positive predictive value is not that high, not that great, but a negative predictive value is good. That means whatsoever you are negative, whatsoever test you are normal, you can say, okay, you are not allergic to that. But whatsoever is positive, that could be false positive because of total high IG. So this is a little difficult concept. What I want to say, if a particular person is having total IgE value high, more than 300, then the specific IgE, individual IgE to individual allergens could be falsely positive. Whereas skin prick test is not having any false positive. So we need to understand this thing. And that is why if we want to compare between the two, skin test versus the specific IgE, so the skin test is better because the results are available earlier, 15 to 20 minutes. The results are visible. So these are bumpy areas which appear within 15 to 20 minutes. So patient sees, okay, my skin has swollen up now. So whatsoever doctor has applied a little bit amount of allergen and skin has swollen up now so much, I am inhaling or my child is inhaling uncontrolled quantity of the same allergen for years together. He will imagine the airway swelling in a better manner. So he will become more compliant with their inhalers and nebulizers, which becomes important. And then the skin prick test is not having any interference with high total IgE, whereas here there is a false positivity of specific IgE if the person is having high total IgE. That we need to understand. I will be touching. That means you have given certain food item to someone and somebody reacted, which is considered as a gold standard for diagnosing food allergies. So skin prick test is a gold standard for respiratory allergies. Oral challenge test is a gold standard for food allergies. Blood testing is always inferior to these two. Patch testing. Patch testing is basically for type 4 hypersensitivity, that is for contact dermatitis, like for metals, cosmetics, and various flowers. So we can use certain allergenic paste and then patch testing can be done. So once again, comparison, skin prick versus specific or total IgE. Skin prick takes lesser time. Patients get more satisfied. It is more clinically relevant. It is less costly. It is cheaper. And it gives you the true value as compared to any of the blood tests. So this slide will highlight that both total IgE and specific IgE are not that important as compared to a skin prick test in any allergic individual who is having type 1 hypersensitivity. What should be the utility of allergy testing? Why one should you do allergy testing? First, it improves compliance with the medication. Like for an example, somebody has seen that so much swelling has appeared, so he will become better compliant with his inhalers and nebulizers because he will get better understanding how much swelling will be there inside the airways. Second is allergen avoidance. You have told someone, okay, you are allergic to one particular allergen, could be milk, could be egg, could be certain pollen, could be certain cockroach or something, then you can actually execute the definitive avoidance measures, targeted avoidance measures to that, rather than going in a haywire. And third thing, if you know that which particular allergen the person is allergic to, then at that time you can try to desensitize the patient. That is called as allergen immunotherapy. So this is a software which is called as AccuWeather. Everybody is familiar on their mobile phones, smartphones. Everybody is having this AccuWeather. So if you just tap it, you will get the daily update as a forecast, pollen forecast. So like a daily update of ragweed pollen, grass pollen, tree pollen, fungal spores, dust and dander. So if you see the numbering is there. So it is from 1 to 10. If you see, so this is for ragweed pollen, this is for tree pollen, this is for grass pollen, and for molds. So the numbers are like this. And if you just see the forecast for dust and dander, then it is much higher. That is 8, 8, and 6. So if we are already having, the patient knows that he is allergic to that particular pollen, and he can see the forecast, weather forecast, so he can try to avoid that weather, that particular time of the day in which the allergen content will be high for that particular person, and he can avoid it. What other preventive measures we can do? So one is avoid going outdoors on those particular time or those particular days, or he can use the face mask. Today, in today's era of COVID-19, everybody is very familiar with the face mask. So which face mask is most important for prevention of allergies? It is N95. N95 face mask is most important. Just only one line about N95. N95 means N stands for not oil resistant, not oil proof. That means N95 mask cannot be used in oil refineries because it is not oil proof. And 95 means it is able to filter 95% of the particles of the size of more than 0.3 micron. So that we need to understand. Third thing is air purifiers. So air purifiers are good for certain amount of allergens, certain amount of pollens, but you need to really see that how big the room is, how good the HEPA filters are, and they are regularly cleaned or changed or not. So all these factors need to be kept in mind and advising. Then fourth thing is vacuum cleaners. So the vacuum cleaner can be advised if a person who is allergic to dust mite, then at that time vacuum cleaners are very good, useful. But the vacuum cleaner should be of that type in which it is sucking the pollens or the allergens and collecting them in a box rather than releasing them back. Otherwise, you are collecting from the front and releasing them back. There is no point in using that. Then no to pets. So ideally, if somebody is having dog or cat or any other pet animal, then you have to avoid pet completely. But if they say that okay, we cannot live without pet, then at that time you have to just advise them about the minimal exposure to pets, weekly washing of the pets, and you can say like the pets should be not allowed in the living area of the child. So that advice should go. Avoid selected food item. If the person knows that they are allergic to milk, then at that time the milk and all the dairy products have to be stopped. That is mandatory. Avoid occupational allergens. If particular person who is allergic to latex, then at that time he should avoid the normal gloves, surgical gloves which we are using. Different type of gloves are available, like nitrile gloves are there which can be used. Or if a person who is allergic to certain cotton or the silk, then they should not be working in that particular factories or the area. Now coming to the definite treatment, which is called as immunotherapy. Last few slides. So what is immunotherapy? In immunotherapy, what we are doing, that we are giving the same allergen in minute quantities to the individual to which the person is allergic. So that we want that that particular person will become tolerant. In a way, what we are doing, the principle of immunotherapy is that we are changing our Th2 response to Th1 response. So earlier we saw that Th2 is an allergic response and Th1 is a non-allergic response. So we want to change this Th2, that is allergic response, to non-allergic response. This is the basic principle of immunotherapy. It starts acting very early, and the visible clinical effect of immunotherapy is usually visible somewhere 1 year after immunotherapy. The normal duration of immunotherapy is considered to be 4 to 5 years. It's for 4 to 5 years. So these are the recent guidelines for immunotherapy from the European College. And like if we see in this meta-analysis, in asthmatic condition, the symptom score is much better. So they conclude that there is a substantial reduction in short-term symptom and medication score in allergic asthma. Similarly, in rhinoconjunctivitis, if you see, so the symptom scores and medication scores are better. So they conclude that immunotherapy is effective in improving the symptom, medication, and combined scores in patients with rhinoconjunctivitis. Which route of immunotherapy? You can give certain injections, you can give certain drops. So injections are called as subcutaneous immunotherapy. They are having better efficacy, but the safety is the issue. Sometimes the anaphylaxis might happen during the time of injections. On the other hand, sublingual immunotherapy, which is certain oral drops, sublingual drops, they are a little less efficacious but more safer. So you can select, choose in between the two. Then where are we? What we are doing till now? So this is a, you can say like a flow chart from the area for diagnosis of allergic rhinitis. I am sure you all are aware about that. So in this allergic rhinitis, they have categorized it as a intermittent symptoms or persistent symptoms, and then mild, moderate to severe, and severe symptoms. So they have advised for the allergen evidence, and then they are advising consider immunotherapy in moderate to severe symptoms and persistent symptoms. It is important. Similarly, in asthma, as per the GINA 2020 guideline, with all the steps, they are saying considering house dust mite sublingual immunotherapy for sensitized patients where they are having controlled lung function. That means the lung functions are good. FEV1 is more than 70%. So the immunotherapy, when it should be used. So we understood that a particular allergen get attached to the antigen presenting cell, stimulates the Th2 pathway, and ultimately lead to release of all the mediators and lead to the chemical reaction. What we are doing till now, a patient who is coming to us with dermatitis, rhinitis, asthma, we are just giving them bronchodilators, steroids, and then we are talking some fancy treatments. So what we are doing is we are reacting to the situation. That means the situation has already occurred and we are just trying to, you can say like, correct it. On the other hand, what we need to do is that we need to really prevent it from happening. That means we need to really detect the allergen at the first level, and then thereafter we have to execute the allergen avoidance methods as well as immunotherapy so that the Th2 pathway gets changed to Th1, and ultimately this all will be halted, stopped. So we need to really be proactive in our approach. So immunotherapy should be started early rather than it should be started late. So the indications will be if the person is not adequately responding to the usual normal therapy of your bronchodilators and low dose steroids, if there are persistent symptoms, if you have already documented the clinically relevant allergens by skin prick test, if the future exposure is unavoidable, that means a person who is like a beekeeper and he is allergic to honeybees, then at that time, and he cannot leave the job, then at that time, the insect immunotherapy or the honeybee immunotherapy will be a boon to him. So we are regularly doing allergy services there, in which now this you can see the real patient. Here we have just done the skin prick test on this patient, and the most common aeroallergens are dust, house dust mite, and insects. Among the insects, cockroach is the most common in India. The foods I mentioned, milk, egg, and nuts. These are most common under 5 years of age. So I'm going to finish off here. So my suggestion from the presentation will be that we need to really suspect the allergic condition, could be rhinitis or asthma early, identify the allergen with the appropriate history and the test, and then intervene early. The key to success will be right patient and with the correct allergen. If you want to learn more, this is a book which is called as Allergy in a Nutshell, and which is available on Amazon. This is the first book in India, but it's very simplified manner. You can go through it, and which is really available. Or if you want to learn more after completing your DNB, you can join our diploma program, which is called as Diploma in Pediatric Allergy and Asthma, which is available from our website. So with this, I will invite the questions and stop my presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Neeraj. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Neeraj. Friends, what Dr. Neeraj has done is he has given you an overview of allergy testing and various other things. And you may get a question in the theory also on allergy testing and the various pros and cons of using various kinds of allergy tests. I think he has beautifully delineated what are the advantages and disadvantages of each and every one of them. Any questions? I can't see anything in the chat box. Dr. Bharat? Neeraj, can you see anything in the chat box?
No, sir, there are no questions in the chat box. Sir,
Something has come.
Yeah, there is one question. Some question is there. So should we start early weaning? Question is that should we start early weaning? So the answer will be that no. It is basically exclusive breastfeeding for 6 months, and then the weaning, the appropriate weaning should be started. But many a times in certain homes, the breastfeeding continues, exclusive breastfeeding continues for longer time, for 8 months, 10 months, 1 year, or the solid food item introduction is delayed. So that is not warranted. It should be started at an appropriate time. Somewhere 6 to 9 months is the ideal time for weaning. Why there
Can I interject at this point?
Sir.
Sorry, Neeraj, can I just interject at this point? Weaning is now a term which we never use. We don't use the word weaning because we don't wean the child off the milk. We use the term complementary feeding. Complementary feeding is that you are complementing the breastfeeding with some solids or semi-solids. So don't use the, friends, don't use the word weaning. It is complementary feeding. And what you do is you give 1 or 2 feeds, which are semi-solids or pureed stuff, and use that to complement the breastfeeding to make up the proteins and calories which may not be given by the breastfeeding after 6 months of age. You can continue, breastfeeding should continue up to 2 years of age. And that's also one of the ways to prevent allergies, because you are introducing the external allergens much later on.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Dr. Neeraj, you can carry on.
Yes, sir. So the second question is why there is more Ig level in Indian population. So as we mentioned that the reason for increase in IgE is basically you can say like beyond the allergy. It is like parasites. We are having more parasites in our developing nation. We are having more parasites in our gut, helminths. Then we are having more pollution as compared to the Western environment. So then reason of smoking, HIV, Epstein-Barr virus, and then there are many other reasons. So that is why it is all sort of environmental factors which is responsible for increase in the normal physiological IgE levels as compared to the Western literature. So can we get to see your lectures if we have to see again? I think that need to be answered by Dr. Bharat from National Board. So he will be answering that. And
We'll be sharing this recording of this session to all the candidates,
yeah,
so they can view anytime the presentation.
correct. So how useful is omalizumab and anti-IgE for allergic diseases? So very limited use. It is like on a certain cohort of people who are having, you can say like the IgE levels in between somewhere around 500 to 1100, 1200, and their symptoms are refractory, especially in case of asthma. Then at that time we can use omalizumab, but we have to consider that omalizumab is a costly therapy, one. The second thing is the omalizumab is not a Ramband dawai. Omalizumab is, you can say like reduces the asthma exacerbations by 50%, and till you continue omalizumab, it will reduce. Once you stop omalizumab, after that the symptoms will reappear because it is just antagonizing the IgE. It is not stopping or it is not reducing the production of IgE. That we need to understand. What is the view on starting EC albumin in infancy? So what I would like to say is that EC should be started, as Dr. Anupam has rightly said, that after 6 months of age we can think of. So EC should be started somewhere in between 8 months, 9 months. It should be started. Yeah. Any other question?
So I think we can end this session, sir, right now, sir. I think no more questions from the candidates, I guess.
Okay.
We can end the session, and we would like to thank you, sir, for your wonderful lecture, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.